and welcome to Dingers and Stingers, the only show brave enough to watch the AFC South. That is Drew. I am Matt. We are famously missing the camera shy Dallas this week, but that is okay. We are going to miss him, but we are going to dive into another episode here this week, breaking down the AFC South, one of football's um,
Divisions.
most fun divisions. It's top eight most fun divisions. Um, we've been looking forward to this one all week.
Definitely
So
top eight.
we're oh yeah, easy, easy. We're gonna go ahead and just dive right in. We can go ahead and take a look at last year's standings. Someone has to make playoffs from every division, and last year for the AFC South, that was the Texans. They went 10-7, and they lost to the Chiefs in the divisional round. Following that were the Colts in second place at 8-9. Um, Third is Jacksonville Jaguars. They went 4-13, and somehow worse than that was the Tennessee Titans going 3-14. So definitely a division that mostly can pretty much only improve, really, if you want to think about it optimistically. But let's go ahead and dive in. Dallas always has us going in last year's standings, so we'll start first with Houston. Um, Houston has had their they've had their issues this offseason, and they definitely had some issues last season. Obviously, they made playoffs and they were able to get to the divisional round, but they were projected to be a lot better than they were, and I think a lot of people had a lot higher expectations for them last year, just based off of CJ Stroud's rookie performance, and they brought in Stephon Diggs, and they had all these big lofty goals for their season, and it just seemed like a mixture of underperformance and injuries kind of ruined that and shot it down the drain. So, we'll talk about what they kind of brought in here. As far as their notable additions go, we've got guys like Nick Chubb, Charlie Kirk, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Cam Robinson, the left tackle, Laken Tomlinson. So some notable names for sure. And then as far as guys that left, obviously Stephon Diggs, now a Patriot. And their biggest move of the offseason, honestly, losing Laramie Tunsil, who they traded to the Washington Commanders. So a lot of turmoil. They also, I believe, got rid of their offensive coordinator and replaced him. So going into the X factors, Drew, what do you think is kind of the X factor for the Texans this year? How can they repeat or get back to the success that they had?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it in saying it was a disappointing year, despite winning 10 games, despite making the playoffs. I think the expectations for this team were higher, and they just didn't play as well as they had the year before. A little bit of a sophomore slump for both CJ Stroud and maybe D'Amico Ryans, their head coach, as well, in his second year there. Um, That being said, I still think this is the most talented team in this division. It's not necessarily saying a lot, but I still have the most faith in this team. Uh, and my X factor has to be this new look offensive line. Three out of the five starters this year, as of right now, are new names to the Texans. That includes Cam Robinson, who you mentioned, as well as Laken Tomlinson. That's both the left side guys, I believe, starting off. And then they took in the draft, the second round, Ariante Urseri from Minnesota, and right now he is slated to start at right tackle. So three new guys there trying to protect C.J. Stroud. I know Laramie Tunsil was a pretty good tackle in his own right. So that's going to be a key here. If you can protect C.J. Stroud, if he can have time to throw the ball, he's got good receivers. Excuse me. He's got Christian Kirk is a solid addition to a squad that already had Nico Collins. Tank Dell's coming back from injury, right? I don't know.
Hopefully at some point.
Yeah.
His injury was pretty bad, but he is expected, I think, at some point this year. Exactly when is still up in the air.
Um, still a talented room with or without
Hmm.
him. And then some veteran running backs, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, couple of guys we've seen have really good years, and maybe they've got a little more left in the tank. I think it all hinges on this offensive line. I think their defense is super talented and will keep them in games no matter what. But it's the difference between them being, one of the best teams in football and just a solid team. I think is this offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. Like at their peak, this is a team that is competitive across any division, right? And at their worst, they're still good for this division, but it's probably looking like an early exit. I completely agree with you. I think this is pretty much fully hinged on their offensive line. The defense was pretty solid last year. They had their moments, but overall, D'Amico Ryans produces very good defense. The offense has to get it together. Mixon had a solid year last year if you look just at the statistics, but that didn't do much in terms of actual, win loss and making this team successful come the postseason. Yeah, and like you said, he's got a solid wide receiver room still. They've got solid weapons. Even got good tight end. And Dalton Schultz. They drafted the two receivers out of what was it? Some random school. It was like Iowa or like Iowa State. They got
Yeah,
is Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins.
Iowa State. Yeah,
Yeah, Iowa State. And both of those guys looked awesome and were pretty highly touted in the rookie draft. So they definitely wanted to stack this room around CJ Stroud and kind of make it known like he's got every weapon, available to him at this point. If they can get even league average pass protection, which they did not have last year, I fully believe we see a resurgent CJ Stroud in year three. So yeah, that's we agree on that one, and it'll be fun to see. It'll be fun to see what the Texans cook up this year because at the end of the day, I do. There's a lot of players on that team that I like. I like D'Amico Ryans. I think that they're a fun team. So, of any of the teams in the AFC South, they're the team I would want to be watching.
yeah, and they're at their best, they're as fun of a team to watch as anyone. Um, but
Yeah, and I'm all for bringing more good teams to the AFC and seeing if anyone can challenge the Chiefs because you know either the Chiefs prove themselves to be really just that great, or we get to see something fun and new.
yep.
So fingers crossed for the Texans. But moving on to the somehow second place Colts. This may be the most shocking second place team, and somehow is clearly the second best team in this division, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, last year they obviously had a very like interesting kind of topsy turvy year. Anthony Richardson, people were hoping he was going to have his major breakout last year. Obviously one of the more raw prospects we've ever seen in the NFL draft. They're hoping he gets his rookie year under his belt. Second year, he comes in and kind of can perform better. And instead, all we get is some really inconsistent play, some injuries, and we had the whole debacle with him, walking off the field in that one game because he was apparently, reportedly, just out of breath. Um, so really just a weird situation. And to make it more confusing in the offseason, they go ahead and bring in Daniel Jones, disgruntled New York Giant veteran. Um, and that just puts a lot of weird intrigue at the position for them. I don't know if it's good or bad. Um, but it's an addition of note. They also went out and they bolstered their secondary. They brought in Trevarius Ward. They brought in Cameron Bynum. And then they brought up some depth for Jonathan Taylor, who's had a few injuries here or there the last couple of years with Khalil Herbert. But the biggest, offseason news for them personnel wise has to be the fact what was once a really big strength of theirs in their offensive line has quickly become a unknown, to say the least. They lost Will Fries, their offensive guard, former Pro Bowler, and then Ryan Kelly, former All Pro, their center, is gone as well. So they have some important positions to fill on that line, which will probably prove to be important given that they really do lean on that run game there in Indianapolis. So Um, yeah. As for X factors, Drew, what do you got for this team?
I'm gonna go with Jonathan Taylor, the running back. I don't usually use running backs for like the really important players on the team necessarily, because I think a lot of other factors go into that. But I think on this team I can make the exception because first of all, the expectations on this team are not very high. They shouldn't be necessarily very high. The quarterback situation is interesting. I think Anthony Richardson's probably a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. Yet I trust Daniel Jones to play more competent football than Anthony Richardson, and that's kind of saying something. Um, you mentioned the kind of rebuilt offensive line. They similar situation here. But I think Jonathan Taylor, as good of a year as he has, it's going to determine how good of a year this Colts offense has. Because we've seen him in the past be one of the better running backs in football. 2021, I think you would say he was probably the best, and
Certainly.
then last year he, after a couple kind of injury-ridden years, last year he had another really solid year. So I think there's still a solid player in here. And I think they're going to rely on him a lot because I think the pass game is not going to be very strong. And in particular, if the run game doesn't get going, the pass game won't have a chance. So, um, yeah, I think a lot rides on Jonathan Taylor. Um, but whereas I said the Texans, it's the difference between one of the best teams and like just an okay team. I think this is the difference between an okay team and a very, very bad team.
Yeah.
There's, we'll talk about the other teams in this division, but there's not a ton to like here with the Colts roster right now. Not a lot of faith.
Yeah, I would argue genuinely 3 out of the 4 teams in this division are potential number one picks. Like, in very honest opinion, like any of these teams in this division, this is a tough one. Um, but yeah, for my X factor, um, I had a really hard time when I was thinking through this one because it's like Jonathan Taylor did have a good year last year, and they weren't a good team. And their offensive line had been good before, and they weren't really a good team. And it was like only a couple of years back they actually had a really good defense, and they were super, scrappy and got a lot of turnovers, and they weren't really a good team. And I just think it's interesting, since Shane Steichen's gotten here, since they drafted Anthony Richardson, the thing that I think I realized as like kind of just a cultural issue for the Colts is they don't seem to like stick to a singular philosophy. They've tried interchanging quarterbacks. Even before Anthony Richardson, they went all sorts of different quarterbacks. They had Joe Flacco, they had Philip Rivers, they had Matt Ryan, and granted, those all sound like the same guy at the end of their career. But like they went with all these different guys, and then they bring in Anthony Richardson, which is a total shift from where they were and what made them successful. And then Anthony Richardson starts to struggle, and what do? They bring back Joe Flacco, and then what do? They bring in Daniel Jones, and all the while, they have drafted a second round receiver basically every year since Steichen's got there. And I think they're rocking like 4 second round picks in their wide receiver group right now. And this year, they spend high on Tyler Warren and they go out and get the tight end. And I just think this X factor for this team has to be commitment to a philosophy. Because I believe the best coaches in football, the best coaches, in any level of football, they have a scheme and a philosophy that they stick to, and they find ways to make it look different. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the conviction they have of what can win games, where it feels like the Colts are doing the like Madden bit where you just keep changing the playbook every week and seeing which one produces more points. And it hasn't worked. It just feels like no one on their team is getting better. They're kind of just putting talent on the field and saying like, oh, hopefully it works this time. And I think they just need to commit to something, whether it be going back to the old days where it's just they're going to be a power run team. They're going to run through Jonathan Taylor, like you said. That was successful for them. That was a good thing for them. They could do that. Or whether they want to turn into kind of that more college style RPO run option team through Anthony Richardson, I think that has merit, and I think that could work. Even if they wanted to commit to Daniel Jones, right? Like I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones fan, but they just need to commit to someone and something and some style of play because I think all it does at this point, you invested so much into Anthony Richardson, it hurts his development to continually not commit to him. At some point, he was the number 4 pick. You need to let him just have a season. Like he's constantly having to look over his shoulder, and he's been doing it since he was a rookie. Like I don't know. So I think my X factor for them has got to be just commitment to something. Um, because I had a tough time trying to think of one X factor for them. So maybe it's a bit of a cheat, kind of beat around the bush with it, but that's what I had. So
I think it's a good.
well,
I think that's a good take because I think they haven't committed to even like the idea of a rebuild. You take
mhm,
Anthony Richardson number 4 overall. He's clearly a project quarterback. He started like less than 10 games or something in in college
yeah,
football, like
yeah,
just very very raw. And so you know what they should have done is just hit like full year sitting and then just give him the job and see where he goes with it and take the
mhm,
lumps. I think they were, this division's winnable because all the other teams are so bad that they prioritized winning, week by week over the development of Anthony Richardson. And I think that might have
mhm.
been the wrong thing to do long term uh, when you spent the number 4 pick on this guy.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I feel like they probably looked at their division and said, we have a window here. We might be able to, get some playoff appearances, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like you kind of have just stunted the growth of the most athletic quarterback to ever enter the league. Like, there's coaches who would be chomping at the bit to get their hands on Anthony Richardson. I guarantee it. If he was to be let go or they announced that they're looking at trading him, he would be traded or picked up like that. I mean, he would be the most sought after like prospect, if you will, in football. And so they just have him sitting here and the fact that even like I've never seen it before, but they released the unofficial, first depth charts for the season, all the teams before this preseason, and they can't even commit to whether or not Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson is first string. They said Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones on their depth chart. And it's like you can't even commit to just making a depth chart or making a call. And granted, Anthony Richardson did start the game and of course got sacked and instantly it looks like he broke his pinky. So it's like, of course, he instantly gets hurt, but it's just the fact that like you can't commit to it like anything at this point, and it's frustrating to see. And Shane Steichen, I really thought he was going to be a great coach coming out of Philly, and I don't love what I've seen from him in his tenure here. So we'll move on. We'll move on. We don't need to talk about the Colts and talk bad about the Colts, but yeah, let's move on. Next up,
Duval. What?
Duval. Uh, next up, we've got Jacksonville. One of the more interesting teams in the NFL, despite their performance year in and year out. They always seem to find their way into the news outlets. And yeah, it feels like it feels like they're constantly so close to being over the edge of these rebuilds. And, they had that year with Blake Bortles and the defense where they actually were good. But the year before that, they were terrible. And the year after that, they were terrible. And it just feels like they're constantly like right there and yet are never able to turn that corner. Um, and then last year was a true disaster class. I mean, pretty much outside of Brian Thomas Jr., there was not a positive thing about this team. And that goes for the defense, that goes for the offense. But specifically, I mean, that defense was really bad. Like, genuinely one of the worst defenses I think I've seen on the field. It felt like they never knew where they were even supposed to be. And you'd watch those games, and it's one thing when a team is just good and you have a hard time stopping them. And it's another when the guys are just open by 10, 15 yards. Like, just a clear beat there. Um, and you can kind of see, like, they cleared house a bit. They brought in the new GM, the young guy. They went out and got Liam Cohen. They pretty much cleared house. They got rid of some big names. And so we'll get into that here. Obviously, as I said, they brought in Liam Cohen. They brought in their cornerback Jordan Lewis. They brought in a backup Nick Mullins because Sonny has had his injury issues as well. And then they boosted up that offensive line a bit. They brought in ex-Raven Patrick McCarry and then Robert Hainsey, the center. But as far as their departures go, they lost quite a bit in terms of what was production on their team last year. They lost Christian Kirk, who had been solid in Jacksonville, never great but solid. They got rid of Evan Ingram, who same thing, had his moments but never truly flourished. They got rid of Ronald Darby, and then they also got rid of Gabe Davis. So it's intriguing. They're an interesting team. They obviously had a very interesting season and draft. And Liam Cohen represents something that they haven't really had in a long time in like a young, trend-setting, like up and coming coach. And he had a lot of success in the other South division. So, with all that, what do you think is their X factor this year? I mean, how can they improve on what was truly a disastrous season?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you could say that needs to go right for this team. Um, for me, I'm gonna do a move that I don't usually do. I'm gonna choose a rookie to be their X factor, and that's gonna be number 2 overall pick. Why is he a wide receiver? Is he a corner? Is he both? Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy winner. They moved up to take him number 2 overall,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of weight to that decision, and
Yep.
they lost guys on both sides of the ball. Wide receiver, they lost a couple guys. They lost a cornerback. Here comes Travis Hunter. It seems as of now, he's gonna play both. We'll see how that works exactly, what that mix is. Um, but they need help on both sides, and if he can be what they expect on even one side of the ball, that's a big thing for them. That's good for them if they have a good wide receiver or a good corner. Either one would be helpful. If he can somehow be both and be like the Shohei Otani of football, I mean, that's just outstanding. And that's why you pay to move up and take him number 2 overall for that chance. So, we'll see. I didn't necessarily think of him as like the number 2 player in this draft, but there's so much intriguing about him. You kind of can't help but like want to see how this plays itself out. And
Yeah.
we'll see. I think if he is legitimately good on both sides of the ball, then Jaguars fans should feel a little bit better about their future. I think X factor might be a stretch because I don't really see this team going very far. But to have some excitement, if you think whether you like him or not, Trevor Lawrence has gotten paid. He's going to be the quarterback. Uh, I don't think he's awful, but I don't think he's really proven much of anything yet in the NFL. So I'd like to see more from him. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a good player. If you add another exciting young guy to that mix, maybe you're more optimistic about the future, and that's why I'm going with Travis Hunter as the X factor here.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look and it's like they were one of the worst teams in football, both offensively and defensively last year. So what do they do with their, highly coveted pick? They get the guy who can improve both sides of the ball in theory. Um, on paper, the most valuable pick of all time. Truly, you couldn't have gotten a more valuable pick. So we shall see. I believe on the official depth charts, he was listed as a starting receiver and a second string corner. So we'll see how that plays out before the season starts. Um, but it should be interesting for sure. You briefly mentioned my X factor. I'm going with Brian Thomas Jr. Straight up, I don't think this team's going to be good this year. I do think they'll be in the running for a top pick again, and with that means you're going to be playing from behind a lot. And who does best when you play from behind? Receivers. They get fed the ball. And I think if you're a Jaguars fan and this season isn't looking like a playoff season, anything can happen in the NFL. But like, if it starts to look like, yeah, this is another one of those years, Liam Cohen's first year, he's implementing new stuff, whatever. I think the thing you want to see is Brian Thomas Jr. establish himself as a true number one and not just a flash in the pan rookie. Because obviously he's got the speed to be the deep threat. He can do that well, and he showed that last year. But a true number one receiver can do it at all three levels. A true number one receiver can take you from the short game to the long game, the intermediate game. They can beat, top corners. Um, and I think you just want to continue to see his development because at the end of the day, uh, you know, Trevor Lawrence has been here for quite a while now. People don't realize how long he's been in the NFL. And he hasn't had any success. And I think it's fair to say that. He hasn't had any success. And so, whether you think he's the future of this franchise still, whether you think, this strong quarterback class this year or next year could have a Trevor Lawrence replacement, who's to say? Either way, you're going to want to have a number one receiver. And I, I'm excited to see what Travis Hunter can do. I have my doubts about someone being a true number one receiver and full-time corner at the NFL level. But maybe he can come in and still be a great gadget player, a wide receiver too. Have some special plays in there for him. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. unlocks offensive potential for this team. Because you need that guy on the outside to be great. Every great offense has it. So that's my X factor. Jacksonville, once again, they're one of the four teams here. So we'll move on. Last but not least, we have the Tennessee Titans. They were the first pick in the draft. They were quite possibly the most memeable team last year. It felt like every single week that Will Levis started, there was a new image of him doing something on the field that was spectacular. Not in a positive or negative way, usually negative, but truly just the most like memeable images came from his games. And they don't want any of that this year. They went out, they picked Cam Ward with the first pick, rightfully so. And so they're going to be one of those teams that anytime a team gets a new quarterback, and especially one picked so high, I feel like it kind of puts them into this flux of like they kind of could be a wide range of finishing. They could still be bad, they could still be decent, they could be potentially good if we see, a huge rookie season like we saw from CJ Stroud, where he took the Texans from trash to playoffs. And, it should be interesting. But as far as like the players they put around him, it's interesting. They got the ghost of Tyler Lockett. They brought in Xavier Woods, Kevin Zeitler, Draymond Jones, Van Jefferson, Cody Barton. They let Harold Landry walk. They let Chidobe Awuzie walk. It's a lot of names that you're kind of like, how impactful really are these guys at this point? So it's interesting. They didn't do a ton, but it's definitely a very different looking team than it was last year. But with all that, what do you got for me, Drew?
Well, I mean, the easy answer, and that I'm not going to do because of Dallas's rule, where we are not supposed to pick quarterbacks and we're not supposed to choose coaches, would be Cam Ward because he was picked first overall.
Mhm.
He's going to step in and be quarterback one for this team and, start a new era of Titans football. But I think, you know, there are going to be factors at play that impact him greatly. And I think so for me, the X factor is going to be the veterans on this offense. Kevin Zeitler has been around for a long time. Calvin Ridley, sneaky,
Mhm.
has been around for a while now. Tyler Lockett
Mhm.
has been around for a long time. Tony Pollard. There's guys on this offense who have seen their share of NFL football. And I kind of like that the Titans kind of got these guys for a rookie quarterback like this to step into. So um, again, like we've said about the last couple teams, I don't really expect a ton from the Titans. I don't, they were bad enough to be the team that picked first in the draft this past year. I don't think there's going to be some kind of dramatic turnaround this year. But what you want to see is Cam Ward develop, take steps, seem like the quarterback that you want moving forward. And I think if the veterans can be there for him and like, you know, talk some sense into him, I think it can be easy
Yeah.
to be thrown into the deep end as an NFL player and especially as a quarterback and feel like you're drowning because, just things aren't going your way and it's a hard sport and a hard league. So if the veterans can be there and be like, hey man, like, you know, shit happens, interceptions happen, bad mistakes happen, just learn from it and move on and don't get in your head about it. I think that'll be big for his development. So that's my X factor for the Titans this year.
Yeah, I think about, and you're totally right here. I think about what happened with the Rams when Sean McVay first came in. Jared Goff had only played about half a season, looked like a bust, was already getting called a bust. And the first thing Sean McVay did was he brought in two veteran guys. He brought in Andrew Whitworth, who was, an old wily vet left tackle, and he brought in Robert Woods, the same thing, but a receiver. And those guys completely took Jared Goff under their wings. And I mean, what a difference it made, right? Like that next year, I believe we went like 12-5 or something, went to the playoffs. Like Jared Goff had a great season. And it sometimes, a veteran presence can really make a environment that rookies can thrive and kind of grow and learn under. Um, Even when they're not perfect, they can still have the space to grow. So I think you're absolutely right there. For me, I actually went a little bit different than I usually do too. I went with the running back situation here. I think about what is like the best friend you can have for any quarterback, but specifically younger quarterbacks. It's a run game, right? It takes all the pressure off when a quarterback can just turn around, hand the ball off. And I actually really like Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. The issue has been their injuries. And so this year, I really believe, if they're going to be successful as a team, I don't think anyone's expecting them to have the big year, like we've mentioned. But if they're going to be successful as a team and set Cam Ward up for success, I think we need to see some great years from Tony Pollard or Tyjae Spears. It could be one or the other. I'm personally a bigger fan of Tyjae Spears than I am Tony Pollard, but Tony Pollard is still a solid back. So if either one of them can step up and really take a lot off the plate for Cam Ward, I think that would go so far as his development and allowing him to kind of acclimate to the NFL. So I think the worst thing you can do is stick a rookie into a bad, roster and just be like, all right, make everyone better around you. Like that's so unfair. Um, so yeah, I think definitely that would be great for them. Um, and yeah, so I mean that's the AFC South, man. It's a lot of teams that don't seem to have a lot of expectations on them. It is a lot of teams with a lot of moving parts. Um, yeah, it's kind of just a lot of unknown. I think this may be, maybe we'll see. We'll see how you felt about it, but I could see this being one of the tougher divisions to predict simply based on three out of the four teams feel very similar. Um, So we'll go to our division standings predictions, and we'll start with you, Drew. How do you think this division finishes here?
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. It's going to be a tough one because not because it's going to be a race to the top, it's going to be a race to the bottom. I do think the Texans should easily win this division, regardless of, if they're getting their best performances or not. I think they're just talented enough to be the best team here and go to the playoffs that way. I did pick for second place. I picked the Jaguars. I just kind of
Mm,
trust their experience slightly more than these other two teams. I mean, I'm thinking still in the range of 6 or 7 wins, though. Not this is not going to
yeah, really
be
good second place.
it's not going to be a team that's threatening the Texans. And then I put the Titans in third, right around the same spot I would imagine as the Jaguars. But just that despite the veterans they signed and everything, and despite Cam Ward having a lot of potential, I just think it's going to be a year of development for them. And then I have the Colts finishing dead last. I just don't really like this Colts roster as it's currently constructed. And as talented as Anthony Richardson seems to be, I trust their quarterback situation probably the least in this division. Between him and Daniel Jones, it's all potential, but no trust. And
Yeah.
so I just have the Colts finishing last, and maybe they move on from their quarterback carousel they've kind of been on for a while, and get someone in next year's draft pretty high up.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, I could see all those things happening. Um, for me, I definitely, Texans first. I think they could lose CJ Stroud and still win the division. Like, it's just the state of the division. I think the Texans have an actual roster, where these other teams may have some players, but the Texans are the best team. They will finish first, calling it here. Second place, I also had the Jaguars. Like you, I do believe they have experience at the right positions, at least, even if they weren't good. Under Doug Peterson, they definitely had their struggles, but I also really like Liam Cohen. I love what he did with Baker Mayfield, and I love what he did with the Bucks. And he was able to take some pieces that I would argue talent wise are pretty similar, from the Bucks and the Jags, and he was able to create a really great offense out of it. And the Jaguars still have a really solid running back room, full of a variety of different talents. Should have a solid receiver core. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been good, but you can not take away that he was talented. The performance just hasn't been there. So I think the Jaguars finished second. I have the Colts and the Titans flipped for me. Um, I do just think that the Titans have a really, really weak roster as a whole. Um, and there's part of me that wanted to stick the Colts last because the Colts have a second place, schedule, whether that's deserved or not. But at the end of the day, I like their offensive roster enough to say if they can stick to one of Richardson or Daniel Jones, they should at least be competitive enough to not be in that top pick running. Um, you've got Michael Pittman, you've got Adonai Mitchell, you've got Alec Pierce, you've got Josh Downs, you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Tyler. Like, at some point, like, you got weapons, man. Like, just score and you should win some games, right? Like, all you got to do is just, I don't know. But I have the Titans finishing last, Colts third, Jaguars second, Texans first. Weird division, man. AFC South. I apologize that you guys exist. Like, that is, it's not fun. Like, you just look at the whole thing, you're like, ooh.
It's very interesting too. This just occurred to me. If Anthony Richardson is indeed like the Colts starter for the most part, that's all four quarterbacks were within the top four picks of their respective drafts, and I just don't feel good about any of them. CJ, well, okay, I shouldn't say that. CJ Stroud, I think is really good, and I think Cam Ward can be, but it's just tough for a rookie coming into a team that was clearly not good. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's an interesting development that way, but
Anthony Richardson will be the lowest drafted quarterback in this division.
yeah. And Daniel Jones was a first round pick for if he ends up getting time. Um,
Yeah, Daniel Jones was a high pick, I believe.
yeah, so it'll be very interesting to see.
Daniel Jones was the sixth pick.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, they're all top six. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it ends up. I don't look forward to the journey in this division, but we'll see.
Mm-mm.
Titans have the Broncos week one, famously my favorite team. We'll talk about them in a few weeks. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the AFC South.
Yeah, it's the AFC South, man. It's a tough one to get through. There's just not a lot to be excited about, but hey, every team is someone's favorite, so someone's rooting for them.
Yep. Shout out Colts fans.
Shout
Um,
out Colts fans. One thing I wanted to ask you about, it's not on the show notes that Dallas has down, but I want to get your thoughts on the Christian Wilkins situation. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, so he's cut by the Raiders because he allegedly kissed someone on the forehead or something.
Well,
Uh,
so the original reporting was that he wasn't rehabbing properly from a foot injury. And then it comes out that the real reason may be because he kissed someone on the forehead jokingly and they were uncomfortable about it. All the while, he did have his contract voided as he was not properly rehabbing. And so he's not getting paid. He only had 1 year of a pretty massive contract. And so he's having a ton of money voided. There's all of this scandal. It's Pete Carroll, baby. And, I'm sad Dallas isn't here to talk about this, but like, I want to know what your thoughts are because it seems like a pretty big mess right now. And like the NFLPA is like, absolutely, they came out and said like they're getting ready to potentially pursue legal action. But the NFLPA also has had a bunch of legal stuff recently, as we talked about. Like, it's a weird place right now to be. And I was curious what your thoughts were because, like, it feels like it happened and then no one's talking about it anymore. But, like, to me, it's kind of a big deal.
yeah, it's just very strange. Obviously, he's a good player. It's a pretty massive deal with the Raiders, right? That he
A
signed.
pretty hefty contract. And it's like, if you had watched any Hard Knocks when he was on the Dolphins, he is just a goofy dude. Like the guy's always messing around. He's always joking. He's always, pushing or slapping or doing something. Like he is just kind of a clown on the field. And I think like I don't know, man. Imagine getting cut because you gave a dude a forehead kiss.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that alone is just kind of ridiculous and makes me, as always, scratch my head at the Raiders. Kind of what's going on over there? What are your values?
and like Tom Brady famously is a kisser,
Yeah,
and he's one of the big decision makers over there now. So like, what's going on?
yeah, very strange. He's still unsigned right now, right? Um,
Yeah, I'm sure teams are just waiting to kind of see what the like situation is going to be because it's like, is he going to be guaranteed his contract? Will it be one of those things where he's put on waivers, and so if a team takes him, they have to give him the contract? I'm sure that teams are kind of waiting out that situation, but also I don't know if there's any credence to the foot injury. Is he not, rehabbing from his foot injury? Because if that's the case, yeah, teams probably won't want to train or try and sign him. So it's very interesting, and I was
yeah,
very curious what you had to say.
I mean, yeah, I don't know as much about it as you do, but it's all just, it seems a little sketchy, um, perhaps on both sides. So,
Yeah,
we'll see. But I think he'll help a team. But now there's this, you know, kind of a lot of baggage with him. So we'll see who takes a chance. Uh,
yeah, definitely. I mean, as you said, I think whatever team he ends up on, he makes a pretty big impact. So be interesting to see where he ends up. But what are your thoughts on some other news in the NFL? Maybe the bigger news. Actually, certainly the bigger news. Uh, Micah Parsons requested a trade.
right. Yeah, we recorded our episode last week
Hmm.
on the NFC East.
And like
And
right before the episode, Terry McLaurin requests his trade.
right. And
And like
then
right after the episode.
yeah, it was like the next morning or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean it we did mention that there was a possibility because there has been this kind of turmoil. But yeah, Cowboys are even more of a mess than we kind of knew.
Hmm.
Um, I'm very interested to see who gets him. I hope it's like a team that, I root for. Not saying the Broncos, but not a team that I hate.
Not the
Um,
Chiefs.
right, like not a team like the Chiefs. I'm very interested to see how that plays out. It's football's a dramatic sport sometimes. With all these, it's the one way players can have power is holding out and then requesting trades, and we'll see what kind of package he lands, what Jerry Jones does
Yeah,
with
I
that.
mean, it definitely it's one of those things. I'm curious if this ends up just being another Miles Garrett, where like he makes such a fuss over wanting to leave and be a part of a different team and all this. And then really it was actually he just wanted like $5 more million.
Money
Um,
talks at the end of the day.
yeah, if the Cowboys come back and offer him the biggest bag of, any player, is he going to say no to being the highest paid player for his childhood favorite team? I would be hard pressed to, certainly. But one of the things I saw that honestly it could have been my stinger on the baseball episode, but or not stinger, dinger. Aaron Donald was out commenting all over Instagram posts with him because the Rams and Cowboys are doing joint practices right now. Um, and Aaron Donald literally commented on one of Micah's posts and was like, "Hey man, if you ever happen to get onto the Rams this year, I might just have to come out of retirement to join that front seven." It was like thinking about that front seven of Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Aaron Donald. We brought in Poona Ford. We have Byron Young. We would have, uh, Michael Parsons. It's just like, yikes, man, that would be insane. And there's part of me now because everyone thinks the Rams are stockpiling our first round picks next year, so that way we can trade up and get whatever quarterback we so choose. Part of me is willing to sacrifice the quarterback position next year in exchange for some Micah Parsons and AD because my goodness, would that defensive line like legit be maybe the best in a generation, best ever? Like it's it would be quite exciting to say the least.
Yeah, I mean that would be crazy if that happened. Um,
And honestly, think about watching Dallas watch a Seahawks Rams game.
I don't want to. It makes me nervous. That whole thought.
Yeah,
uh,
I'm actually like really worried for him.
yeah, we'll see how it plays out. You know, problem with doing these once a week is so much can change. You know,
Yeah.
despite us already doing our breakdowns, but Rams are still to come on one of ours. So maybe they make a move
Yep.
before we break them down.
We shall see. But that seems like it's going to do it. I mean, unless you got any other big pieces of news you want to break down, but as far as I've got, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Dingers and Stingers. Drew, you got anything last minute?
Uh, Nothing except for thanks for watching. Subscribe,
Yeah.
like our shit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we'll try to be more active on social media. You know, it's hard. We got
Guys, social media sucks.
yeah, a lot of stuff going on, but we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time on Dingers and
So
Stingers.